Hey guys, my name is Karan Jerath, and I'll be giving a talk today. I think we'll give it about 5 or so minutes for everybody to start, but I'll look at getting ready in the meantime. In the meantime, feel free to send a message on the chat letting me know where you're from and what brought you here. Okay, we'll give it one more minute before I start. Okay, so let's begin. So once again, good morning. My name is Karan Jerath, and today I'll be talking to you about the value of constantly putting yourself in uncomfortable situations and why you should embrace them when they occur. And today I'll be talking to you about the value of constantly putting yourself in uncomfortable situations and why you should embrace them when they occur. Okay. So just a little bit about myself, and we'll be going more into this through some of the examples that I'll be giving, but I grew up in Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia for 11 years prior moving to the United States. And, and I'm currently a petroleum engineering student at the University of Texas at Austin. I'll actually be graduating in about a month, and I'm looking forward to seeing the next steps as I continue my career in sustainability. But while in high school, so this was in 2008, or after we'd moved to the US in 2008, and while in high school, a few years later, I participated in something called the Science Fair program. And if this is something that you've not heard about or have been exposed to but are still in high school, I definitely recommend talking to your teachers to seeing if a program like this exists in your school. But essentially, the Science Fair program is a program that allows students to be able to pursue research topics while in high school, typically in the form of credit. Um, and I use this as an opportunity, and in through the next examples, I'll show you why I got into it. But essentially, what I did in the Science Fair program is over the course of 2 years as a junior and senior in high school, I developed this device, which is called a subsea cofferdam. And in particular, it was targeted for solving subsea oil spills like the Deepwater Horizon spill or the BP spill, if you've heard of those spills. This was a spill that occurred in 2010 in the Gulf of Mexico, and one of the most devastating modern day oil spills. But how the device works very briefly is it would sit on top of the spill 2 miles below the surface and collect the water, oil, and gas from the bottom of the device. And through there, these phases would enter, and over time, through temperature, density, and pressure sensors, separate to where they can be recycled immediately. So this already depleting resource of crude oil now has the potential to be reused and recycled in some way in the event of an unforeseen oil spill. And the competition that I participated in was called the Intel International Science and Engineering Fair. This is the world's largest pre-collegiate science fair competition, and it is an opportunity for you all to participate in as well if you do go through the science fair program. Since then, I have patented this device, as well as it's allowed me to be recognized as one of the members of the Forbes 30 Under 30 Energy List, and this was an honor that I had that I'd received in 2006 as a freshman at UT Austin. Likewise, I now serve as one of the United Nations Young Leaders for the Sustainable Development Goals. And if you've not heard of the Sustainable Development Goals, these are essentially 17 global goals that countries from all across the world have agreed upon that highlight some of the main issues that we as a society are facing. This could come in the form of climate change, hunger, poverty, gender equality, education, and so on. And so in particular, I'm focusing on quality education through advocating for STEM education among the youth, as well as life below water and life on land. So more so from a sustainability side, and advocating for innovations that help target or help control climate change, and more of an environmental approach. And this is a role that I've had for the past 2 years or so, and it's given me the opportunity to travel around the world and essentially talk to a lot of youth in various countries and learn about the problems that they're facing as a society and the opportunities that they themselves have within their particular regions. And so today in this presentation, I'll be breaking it up into 2 parts. The first is breaking out of comfort zones. And with this section, I'll go through essentially a bit of my life story on what set me up for constantly thinking about ways for self-improvement, as well as continuing to diversify experiences. And so I'll go through one story through this. And then finally, The second component is finding ways to make impact at an early age. And through this, I'll give some insights of things that I've learned very briefly um, over the past few years, and just advice on ways for young people to make change. And so I'll start off with breaking out of comfort zones. Story is best told if we start from the beginning. As I mentioned, I grew up in Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia, for 11 years. And while living in Malaysia, this was a place that my family and I loved. We loved the fusion of cultures in the area, the sense of community that was offered from the international school that my sister and I attended, and the ease of living close to relatives in nearby regions such as Dubai and India. Overall, I would say that it was a comfortable lifestyle. But there's nothing that truly prepares you for the difficulties of having to leave everything behind to start a new life in a foreign country. And this was the case for me and my family after learning that we were going to be moving to the United States for my father's new job. The move, while it made sense for educational purposes and for new opportunities, had me leave the only place that I ever really knew. Regardless of if I was ready for change, it was going to happen. And the only option was to accept and embrace it. And I'm sure some of y'all can resonate with this, having experienced this at some point in your lives if you've ever had to move. I personally was not ready for change, and my actions clearly depicted this. Rather than welcoming this uncertainty and using it as an opportunity to take risks, develop personally, and learn from mistakes, I fixated on the need to feel accepted and to fit in. This caused me to become reserved and self-conscious. During those first 3 years in the US, simply put, I followed the crowd and fell into the trap of trying to find a comfortable state, only to realize that there was no long-term benefit of doing this. It would not allow me to build confidence, break out of comfort zones, or even continue to diversify my perspectives. And I never truly embraced the situation being the move because it because I shielded myself from uncertainty. And while this move in particular is my example or one of my examples, this of course applies to various other this could of course easily apply to various other topics such as public speaking or just taking initiative and taking risks. Looking back, I would consider myself as somebody who nobody would have imagined anything of, given that I was not finding ways to improve. And this would have probably been the case throughout high school as well, had it not been for one teacher that made a statement that changed the trajectory of how I viewed things. "Don't be a nameless face in the hallway," she said. And at that moment, I realized that there were two options. One, you could go through life doing what everybody else is doing, only to realize one day that you've underutilized your time and potential. Or two, you can forget the norm and instead actively try to set yourself apart and find ways to make a lasting and impactful difference, regardless of the scale. And this is the most important thing, regardless of the scale. To me, the latter seemed like the better option, and this then became my turning point. I began to make decisions only to see where the opportunity would take me. One of them was to enter the science fair program. And this topic of making decisions only to see where opportunities take you is something that I'll further emphasize with more examples later in this presentation. But within the science fair program, I'm not going to pretend like I knew exactly what I was doing because I was honestly just blindly pursuing it in the first 2 years. But I can tell you why I continued to embrace it through the hardships. I continued it because for the first time in my life, I volunteered to be challenged. And this is a very different feeling. I'd put myself out there to try to achieve the imaginable with a project with no definite solution. And over the course of my 4 years within this program, I'd sacrificed weekends, vacations, and countless hours to develop an idea without even knowing where it would take me. Complete uncertainty. But I really wanted to grow, develop, and make an impact. And that's what further drove me to continue doing this. And the outcome from just looking back alone resulted in an immense amount of internal growth. But if we take a step back for a moment and look at this from a big picture standpoint, you can see that it all happened when I decided to try something unfamiliar. And this is where my challenge for you comes in moving forward. And the challenge is to do something that is outside your comfort zone, something unfamiliar to you, because growth comes from discomfort. Find what you're passionate about and figure out how you can make a lasting and impactful difference. You can, of course, start small and go at whatever pace you are most comfortable with initially. But the most important thing is to start now and to actively be thinking of ways to overcome any fears that you might have, and so on. And of course, this, as I said, applies to public speaking, which I think is the most applicable one for a lot of young people who have not had the opportunity to um, serve in a lot of public speaking roles beyond school or outside of school. And there's this one quote that I really aligned with back in high school, and it was that, and it was from a famous mathematician called Alan Turing. And he once said that sometimes it's the people who nobody imagines anything of who do the things that no one can imagine. And this is a concept that I'll continue to talk about further in the presentation as well. So this next topic that I want to go into is about finding ways to make impact at an early age. So one thing that I strongly believe that youth need is to find their voice at an early age or in their lives in order to make the most impact. And this comes from not taking a traditional route, but instead forging their own path by finding opportunities and starting initiatives. As youth, we have a powerful voice, in particular, you have a powerful voice, whether you know it or don't. And so it's key to use it. If you didn't know, we represent the largest generation of young people, and we stand to feel the effects the most when it comes to global problems. This is also a time period when you have the least amount of commitments, so make the most of it. Don't expect people at this point, don't expect much from you. So when you do pursue initiatives and take roles and become young leaders, the world will sit up and listen. And I absolutely understand that this is easier said than done, because at a young age you might not have the resources um, to being able to start something, but that shouldn't deter you at all. If anything, you're just as creative as the older guys and women out there. Um, and it's really more so how much you take advantage of that. Because at this point, I think everything that you should be doing should be tailored towards learning from your mistakes. And it's better to learn these mistakes at an early age to where you don't then apply them later down the line rather than to figure them out when it does become more serious. The next piece of advice or way to make an impact at a young age is to start local. If you're just starting, you don't have to immediately begin with solving global problems. Instead, find more localized issues you can tackle. This will allow you to, over time, build the foundations for those larger scale problems. An example of this is with my science fair projects. My very first science fair project was not this oil spill device that has the potential to, potentially solve global oil spills or oil spills that are occurring around the world. But instead, my very first one was actually testing bacteria and looking for E. coli samples in water fountains in my local community. So this was various schools in the town that I lived in or parks. And that got me on the track of being interested in science because it just showed me the opportunity of being able to start a project that has no definite solution and to just take it from 0 to 1. My next project then was looking at different fuel sources, and because I was really interested in biofuels. Um, Biofuels are essentially ways or fuels that come from plants like algae, or corn, or other types of plants. But over time, it was slowly scaling that idea. But I would have not been able to have gone straight from nothing to something like the oil spill device, because that obviously required more technical knowledge. And I only developed that through starting with smaller and more localized solutions. That too, a lot of time, successful ideas do happen if you yourself are experiencing them. And for the most part, you may not directly be experiencing a global issue. So having more localized ones that you're seeing on a day-to-day within your community can further drive that passion, to get into this mindset of being entrepreneurial and solving problems in your community. This next one is taking initiative. And nobody's going to tell you what your next steps are. I think that is a reality we all understand. So you need to find those opportunities and make the most of them by creating something. Initiative, for the most part, can also come through you wanting to better a particular skill set. For example, in college, I realized that my high school had not truly trained me to what it meant to be a leader. And so I wanted to develop that skill set of being able to better lead a group of people. Um, and so I looked at ways in which I could do this that also aligned with my interests of clean energy as well as promoting STEM education. And so one thing that I identified is that there weren't a lot of clean energy type case competitions or just competitions that allowed youth to come up with ideas and to sort of have a place at the energy decision making table. And so I developed something called the Energy Olympiad in partnership with my university. And the purpose of this was to allow youth from all over Texas, as well as university students, to come together and essentially solve energy related solutions related to the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. And through this, my team and I, in particular, we worked for about 2 years or so developing this competition that gave around $15,000 in prizes. And along the way, it gave me a lot of leadership skills and taught me more so what I did well and what I needed to improve on. And in particular, it's what I needed to improve on that I only now know because of having taken the initiative to start something like this and learn from my mistakes. And so if there are any opportunities that you find or any skill sets that you're wanting to develop, find ways in which you can take that initiative to do so. This next piece is all about identifying mentors. And I think it's very important to get advice from those with expertise and those that have wisdom to share. These could be anybody from teachers, parents, family, friends, or honestly just anybody willing to help. I think it's very important to identify these people and learn from them as much as you can, because they will be willing to share, but it also comes with you taking the initiative to ask them. For me, I had mentors throughout my science fair experiences, or throughout my science fair projects, and you'd be surprised at how much or how willing people are willing to share insight with you. But as I mentioned earlier, that only comes through you taking that initiative and asking them. These mentors can provide you with resources, just general insight, or can help direct you during times where you're not sure with how you want to move on. Um, and so I think overall, it's never too young to have mentors that can guide you through various decisions as you hit milestones within your life. But it's important to utilize them as much as you can. This next piece is called resilience. And there's this one quote that the former president of UT Austin once told me that has stuck with me. And that was to be a hobbit, put one foot in front of the other, and never ring the bell. Now I'll say that once again. The quote was, to be a hobbit, put one foot in front of the other, and never ring the bell. So what does this mean? Well, to be a hobbit, it means to always, and to put one foot in front of the other, it means to always keep moving forward in a positive direction. To never ring the bell means to never give up, because essentially, if you are ringing the bell, it it's a sign of you showing the world that you're done, that you're that you're wanting to give up in what you're currently pursuing, and that you don't wish to move forward with it. And there's no easy way to say this, but there are going to be challenges along the way. With my Science Fair project, I went through over 50 plus different designs before I got to that final one that I'd showed you earlier. There were also times where just experimentation was not working out the way that I intended. But it's what you do when you're at your lowest, when you're on the verge of failing, that I believe truly define you. And for the most part, or a lot of time, failure is viewed as a negative thing, but in no way should it be. Failure simply means that the route that you've currently taken is not the right one, and that you need to continue ideating on finding ways to move past this roadblock or hurdle. But in no way does it mean that you've not succeeded. All it's shown is that your current approach maybe needs to be modified in some way. And it's really up to you to be persistent and resilient at those times to continue moving forward, because these problems are solvable. It's just a matter of, sometimes requiring more work or more time, or taking a completely different approach and just being more creative with it. The next one is finding purpose. And I think this is one that can apply throughout your entire life. And finding purpose essentially comes through experimenting with different ideas or fields of interest. This is the only way you will know what you're truly passionate about. As I mentioned earlier, I experimented in different fields through my Science Fair projects and ultimately found that my passions lie in sustainability and knowing that any venture moving forward will be tied to this. But the most important thing with finding purpose is all about what you expose yourself to and your willingness to expose yourself to various things. Because you're never going to truly know what you have interests in until you've seen whether you like it or don't. And sometimes you might find this is something that is wasting your time if you're constantly finding areas of interest or areas that you think you're interested in, but realize that you're not. But in no way should you think of it in that sense, because it's just as valuable to fully know that you are not interested in something than it is to continue pursuing it blindly at a later point in your life. And once you have decided or found what you believe your purpose is, one thing to do is to determine the stepping stones you will need to cross to get to that end point. So questions you could ask are, what learnings are you lacking that you need to expose yourself to in order to achieve this end vision? Or what experiences do you not have at the moment that you then go and get out? And it's best to ask yourself questions like this and ultimately come up with a list and then strategize how you're going to start pursuing this. And throughout this, keep in mind of what you want your contributions in society to be. What is your end goal that will allow you to have led a satisfied life? This is of course something that can evolve over time as you continue to expose yourself to different areas of interest. But keep asking yourself these questions through the various milestones in your life, because it'll only help you better shape and better line up with what you're really interested in. And that concludes my presentation. I hope you guys learned from it. If you have at any point have any questions, feel free to email me, and I'll be more than happy to help guide you in any way or continue answering any questions. Thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it, and I hope you guys have a great day. Thank you.